being a homemaker and doing this was definitely not easy at all. We had a 5x growth every year from 2019 onwards. So 2019 we started Soapworks. 2020 we again had a 5x growth. 2021 we did a 5x growth. We grew 5x year on year. You don't really need always to have the fancy, the jargons or the gadgets or the people.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this very first episode of the Working Women podcast. And we bring to you Harini, who's the founder and CEO of a very large skincare company, one of the fastest growing skincare companies in India, Earth Rhythm. So, Harini, let's just start with you, right? I know that you're so inspiring and your story brings out so different components of a working woman, and how do you really balance your motherhood along with really running a very huge company? Every girl is inspired to have a story like you. And if you could just tell us a little bit about your journey, a little bit about your background and your educational background and family background. So let's start there.
Thank you, Shivi. Thank you so much for having me on this show today. I really love coming on such shows just simply because, two reasons is one, I get inspired myself saying the story over and over again. And I feel that from where I've started, if I've come this far, I could go a bit further more. And the second thing is, if I can inspire two other women out there hearing my story, I think my day is done. So I was born and brought up in a city called Chennai, down south. I was born and raised in a very conservative, traditional environment, and the traditional drill of a middle class family, like how education is everything. The goal of your existence in the world is just to probably educate yourself at as much as possible, so that you can hit the corporate someday, have the 7-digit salary, chase after those corporate career, and that's how exactly how a regular traditional middle class family thinks, right? And I think I'm no different, and that's how I did my graduation in commerce. I did my post graduation in retail management, and then I started my career with with Kotak Mahindra Bank. From there on, I moved to Standard Chartered Bank, but then my corporate career isn't something that nothing I can boast about, simply because it hardly lasted for a year or so, right? And why it lasted only for about a year, I think I got married very, very early, as early as 22. And by 23, I delivered my first child, and he was born with a disability called Down syndrome. Now, today, if I look at girls who come for interview at Earth Rhythm at 22, 23 for internships, and probably beginners and starters, I find it really shocking that what did I even do with my life back then, right? At 22, I got married. 23, I had a child, and even before I could even figure out what life was, all about, I was actually dealing with some disability called Down syndrome, and I was actually going through internet to see if my child can walk, if my child can talk, if and because today, even today, I would say disability is a very large topic in India, where still I feel that there's a huge gap as a parent of a child with disability, that normal people or even the medical people don't understand the difference between autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, and so many others, right? So I think that's something that I went through at a very young age. Because of my son's disability, it was a very conscious decision that I took a break from my career, and I didn't want to pursue my corporate career after that. So I would say that the minute my corporate career started, my banking career started, it ended within a year, and I decided to be a housewife, and happy about it. No regrets. I moved from city to city, from then, and I think I moved from Chennai to Hyderabad, and then I moved to Bangalore, and then finally in 2014 I reached New Delhi. And by then I was a mother of two boys. I had a second child as well. And when I reached Delhi in 2014, I'm talking about a journey of about 7-8 years of being a homemaker, and both my kids were at the age of 5 and 3, and they started going to school. And I had a lot of time in my hand, and that's how I started. So my kids started going to school, and I had a lot of time in my hand. And I think that's when I started figuring out, kindling my interest into, during my free time, what can I do to keep myself busy? And I think my most important target at that point of time was being a proper South Indian coming from the south of India. My number one goal was to learn Hindi, to learn how to make rajma masala, and the typical traditional drill of getting into North and trying to fit into the culture there, right? And I think that's how the journey started for me.
Interesting, Harini, and your story is so unconventional on multiple levels, right? Number one is your corporate career is very short-lived, even though you are so highly educated. You went to great universities, you did great courses, you're working at some of the top banks, right? Top companies, and even then, you did get married, maybe because of relatives' pressure or whatnot, whatever the social construct at that time was, and then. Dealing with a child who requires a little bit more attention than your regular child, right? And I'm also a mother to two children. I know how much effort do children require, and having a child with disability further just pushes us back in terms of that's the only thing that is in our mind, right? That's taking all of our brains and all of our mental capacity at that time. So very interesting, very unconventional journey. And Here, just coming to the next question, right? As a mother to two and starting a business, it requires so much risk appetite. And again, you coming from your middle class background and starting and doing your education, going into corporate, how did you develop that risk appetite? How did you think that I can take these risks? Because in my experience, as I started to become as I started to age out, as I started to become older, I started to see that I am becoming more risk averse instead of somebody who takes risks. So how did you navigate that journey?
That's a very interesting take in my life at that point, when I was actually starting off Shivi. I think I still remember those days in 2014 and 15 when I was just starting out. I'd like to probably safely say that I was an accidental entrepreneur, right? And this is something that I commonly say again and again out there, because being an entrepreneur was not a part of my plan or a part of my agenda at any point of time, right from my childhood till today. I mean, I'm still wondering, how did this even happen, right? I think that's because it was more passion driven in the initial phase, right? 2014, 15, I think I still remember when I started off with the journey of soap making, right? I think that's how my entire skill started off, in terms of exploring how to probably make my own set of soaps. And interestingly, because my son had Down syndrome, and he had a condition called eczema, I used to use a typical type of a soap called Castle soaps, which were like pure olive oil soaps, right? And back in 2014, 15, Shivi, India didn't have the concept of these Castle soaps, Bastel soaps, and all of these things in India. And I used to constantly look out for people who are traveling from US and buy it from a brand called Burt's Bees. I used to buy pure castor oil soaps and all of that. And there was a phase, at that point when my Facebook status would always say, anyone traveling from US, please ping me, because I would really want them to carry some soaps for me. After a couple of months, I got really fed up, and I was like, why can't I make these soaps? I mean, I just went, it was a random thought sitting in an afternoon on my couch. I was thinking how to make castle soaps. I just typed on Google, and voila, there was like a lot of videos and a lot of content around saying that there are just three ingredients required to make a castle soap, and it was olive oil, caustic soda, and water. That's about it. Boom. And I was like, what? Just three ingredients? Actually, I managed to source these three ingredients, and I saw a bunch of videos on YouTube, and I ended up making castle soap. It was nowhere close to a soap, let me be honest. It was more like a pattar, a stone. And but after a couple of attempts of trying to make it again and again and again, it landed into something like a soap which lathered, and I was very happy with it, right? I think that's the journey that I started in 2014. And this was a phase when my kids would go to school, and in the afternoon when I'm peaceful, when I have some time, I would pull out all these ingredients, but make all these soaps. And I'd literally love sitting and watching them harden up and cure and lather. And I used to add a lot of fragrance to it. Sometimes I used to omit the fragrance, play around with it like anything, right? And it was really giving me a sense of joy of creating something on your own from scratch. And I think that phase, I think for a woman like me, who always aspired to do something on my own, to wanting to be independent, I think that was the gateway, to be that was starting point of the gateway to probably start into doing something on my own. Even at that point, I really never thought that I'd want to probably make it into a business, or I want to sell this product or anything, right? Today, I think, when I go to these investor pitch, we talk about product market fit, minimum viable product, NPDs, and whatnot, all these stylish jargons. But I think in my journey, from 2015 to 2019 when I started Earth Rhythm, that phase was a very important phase in my entire journey of building Earth Rhythm, because without me realizing, I went through the phase of the product market fit, the minimum viable product, understanding how do you launch a product into a market, understanding the market size, TAM, SAM, SOM, whatever you call it today. All of those was that phase, that important phase of few years for me. Now, with regards to kids, I think for me, I think thankfully, I think the initial phase, right, when kids started going to school, my because it was not a traditional business kinds at that point of time. It is safe to say it was just a homegrown venture at that point of time. I was just a passion project rather. I just make a bunch of soaps, and it was for self use, nothing more than that. And sometimes if I had excess, I would share it with friends and family, and I was very happy with it. That's it. Um, but then by 2015, end of 2015 or early 2016, the bug caught me a bit too seriously, right? Um, the passion project went a little bit intense. And one day, actually, I woke up and I saw my room had about 50, 70 soaps. Can you believe it? Like 70 soaps. And I didn't know what to do with them. I mean, even if it was a dessert, you would end up eating it. And soap is something that you need to actually finish it to use the next one. And what do you do with these many number of soaps? And then I realized, okay, my passion is getting a little too intense, and I have actually made so many soaps, and I started distributing them. Whenever I used to go and pick up my son from school, I would just give her like 10 soaps to all the parents who are standing out there and tell them, use it and give me feedback. Let me know what you think. And after a couple of months, these people would come back to me saying that, hey, Harini, I remember you gave me a Shea butter soap. It was very nice. Can I buy one more of that? And that's how, the whole conversation started. And I was like, oh, wow, I can make that for you. And it gave me a lot of joy to make it for them, right? And doing this time and again and again and again, I realized that this passion project could no longer survive as a simple passion project after that. I had to start charging people a small fee, at least for the raw materials, so that I could continue, running my passion in a more sustainable way. So I think that was the beginning journey of how I was balancing kids and home. And I had actually dedicated one bedroom inside my house. I'd converted that into a studio, and I called that the soap room of my house. And literally that room used to be like my how do I call it, my stress buster, right? Like whenever I'm tired, I'd simply love to go sit in that room and pack some soaps, put some labels. How those Instagram video reels are, when you make those ASMR videos, put that label on. I used to find so much, I used to find it very therapeutic and very, relaxing, that doing this was giving me so much joy. And I think that's how it started. Interestingly, I think for me, the biggest advantage was that although my son had a disability, from the beginning, until the time that, I started Earth Rhythm and I moved the company out and started it more of a, very professional company. My son would, probably not require me at all times around him. Of course, he's non-verbal and he cannot speak at all. He's completely mute, which means that I was in the house, but at the same time, I often used to get this feeling that, I'm not right next to him. Sometimes, I'm always stuck inside the room doing some work. And that used to bother me a lot. And I think I kind of, figured out certain, ways in which I could manage both my work and kids together. And I managed to survive like this until 2019. I think that was the biggest turning point, right? And 2019, by then I had moved to Gurgaon, by the way, and I'd taken a quite a bigger house in order to ensure that I had a bigger space for Soapworks. Back in the day, the company was called Soapworks. Why Soapworks? I made only soaps back then, so I called it Soapworks. And my dad was actually visiting me in 20 end of 2018. And when he was visiting me, he was going to Kailash Mansarovar, and Delhi was his stopping point. Like, he stopped in Delhi for a couple of days, wanted to see the kids, and then he was moving to Kailash Mansarovar. And when he stayed for a week, he literally saw me stuck inside four walls in a tiny little room. And at that point, I was the maker, packer, dishwasher, delivery boy, customer service, everything. Like, by then I had created a tiny little website. I used to, click photos of my own photos, post it on the website, and try to sell them. And my dad was like, Harini, what are you doing inside this room? Like, do you see that your kids outside there are screaming for your attention, and 24 by 7 you're inside this room and you're not able to give time to them? Is this really what you want to do? And that, I think I still remember that conversation with my dad, which we had a very heated argument. And my dad was like, if you really want to work, Harini, shut the shop, go out and find a job and get yourself, probably earning some money and using your time more constructively rather than probably doing something. I mean, the conversation, was very heated, that, my dad was like, what is the cost of your soap? I said about 350 to 400. And he was like, 400 rupees a soap. And what do you think the market size of your soap is? Today you will sell it to 100 people. Do you think 4 lakh people will buy your 400 rupees soap? Maybe not. I don't know. And at that point of time, Shivi, I never had all these business plan or ideas of becoming an entrepreneur or anything. My little joy was that I was able to sell the soap and I was able to actually make money out of it. I was making tiny little margin out of it and I was completely happy with it. And I think, the journey for me was it was rocky. I won't say it was a bed of roses, but I did find my ways out in this entire journey of, figuring out how to, the time management skills, tiny little time, when my kids would go to school, I would finish my work and 7 o'clock take them to the park. To be very honest with you, being a homemaker and doing this was definitely not easy at all.
Hear you, Harini, and you bring in such an interesting perspective, right? And I always see this disconnect between our older generations, right? Our parents, for example, and between us, and even people who are just coming in and having babies now, where at least I feel, right? That's just my take on it, that an unhappy mother, even if they are 24 hours with their kids, they cannot help their kids grow to their true potential. But if a happy mother, satisfied mother, right, even if they spend 6, 7, 8 hours with their kids, quality time, they will raise better generation and better kids. And that's what the kids are looking at, right? The kids are looking at, oh, my mom is so happy doing it. She loves what she does. And when they grow up, they'll probably develop a passion for something like you developed. And that's a role model that we really uh, want to set for our kids. But at the same time, balancing that they don't feel left out, that they don't feel that this other thing is taking my mom's entire mental space at this point. So I think that bringing that balance is so important and so vital. And most of the times our older generation would just focus on maximizing time with our kids, but not really realizing that quality time is more important than just 24 hours in a day. So you bring such an interesting point. And Harini, at that point, I know because your son is differently able, right? Did you have any external assistance as well to help you through the day when you were working, for example? So how did that look for you, and how did you find that person that you can trust your kid with?
I think this is a very, very important aspect that I should stress on, right? Especially the time management that you were telling about, right? I was typically that, I'd like to call myself as a millennial. I'm 37 today, and I would like to call myself a millennial. And I belong to that generation, Shivi, where I neither can relate to my parents' thought process, nor am I in that Gen Z thought process of, let go everything, how do I say it, work life balance and all of those things are like very, very common in today's Gen Z world. But as a millennial, it's very difficult to comprehend. I'm a sandwich between the both the generations, right? And for me, to be very honest, for me, coming out of the house was the biggest barrier of all, and that is the biggest barrier I'd broken in my entire life. Because 7, 10 years after my marriage, I was stuck inside the house with 2 kids. Now, I'm not no cribs or regrets about it, but I had my own kind of pain as well. That like every other corporate woman, I had this dream of going out, doing something, meeting people, wanting to connect, wanting to have my own kind of a social life, but that was actually missing, right? Initially when I started, I still remember where I used to do exhibitions back in 2017-18. I used to do a lot of exhibition, tiny little pop-ups, in Saket Mall. You have a small pop-up there, and do all of that. And I still remember, I used to, even though the pop-up would run till 7 o'clock, I would shut shop at 5 o'clock and rush home, because I know I have to take him for skating class, I know I have to take him for tennis class, I need to do this, I need to do that. I had my own priorities, right? And in the gamble, I was a total mess. I was neither here nor there. And I was not justifying anything that was happening around me. There were points when I used to really feel guilty, like you said, right? Completely guilt driven. That sometimes I'd actually miss out on a class, and I would feel that, oh my God, I just totally forgot about this class. How did I used to blame myself, saying that, shit, how did I even forget going to this class today? So those kind of things did happen in the journey. And I think when my dad and me had that conversation I was telling you a couple of minutes ago, I think that's when my dad told me that, Harini, you need to make up your mind. Either if you're really serious about this, get out and do this in a very serious sense. And if you're not really serious about this, and if you're just doing it, then might as well spend more time with family and ensure you're giving more time to them. You're neither here, you're not there, and you need to figure out what you want to do in life. And and at that point I told my dad that, Daddy, actually I really want to take this up. I want to see if I'll be able to do something. If we win, we win, and if we lose, I have nothing. I at least tried, so I'm completely okay with it. So I want to give it a best shot. So me and my dad together. So my dad said initially, my dad was, a typical dad. He said, first priority, always kids. You promised me that, then I'll help you. I said, yes, first priority, always kids. Let's do this. So with that promise in hand, so we together, we applied for manufacturing license. Why manufacturing license? I think because both of us didn't have a clear thought process or an idea in hand in terms of um, how will the brand probably scale up, what quantity is required, or neither did we have the funds and sources. So the concept of building a brand, especially D2C brand, Shivi, if you look, the typical idea is you have a business plan in hand, you raise some money, and then you go and you find a contract manufacturer who will manufacture your product. And when you go to a contract manufacturer, you have something called MOQs, minimum order quantity. And those minimum order quantities is usually 5,000 P units or 10,000 units per SKU, per product. And in such a scenario, when I had no plan in hand, I had no idea as to which contract manufacturer to go. And I didn't know if I'll be able to sell 5,000 units of a single product when I was only selling 50 to 100 pieces, right? So hence we thought, let's apply for a manufacturing license. Let's manufacture the product ourselves, simply because I think I come from the product side. I'm very proud to say even today at Earth Rhythm, the entire product is handled by me, because I was the brainchild of the one who created every single product, the formulation and all of that. And I wanted to hold that with me. So I decided to apply for a manufacturing license, and we set up a tiny little manufacturing unit right next to my house, literally the next building, right? And I still remember the first day, Shivi, when I went to that place, and I spoke to the landlord and I asked him what is the rent of that particular place. He said it was 30,000 rupees. And I called my dad from that place and I asked him, Daddy, he's saying the rent is 30,000. Do you think I can afford it? So my dad was like, if you ask me today, no, we can't afford it. But if you ask me 1 month down the line, will you be able to do it? Maybe if you work hard, you will be able to do it. So you said you want to try, so give it a try. So I was like, okay, let's take it. Let's give it an honest shot and see. And to my shock, Shivi, I still remember we grew month on month from the month we moved into that unit, right? And that was also because I think when I came out, right, I was completely, in that mode, fire in the belly mode, right? Like I just wanted to somehow make it work at any cost. And I did go through that journey, initially when I was just stepping out of the house, I didn't know how to, probably plan everything. I still remember that, I went and I told my husband that, I want to keep a full time help. Coming from a very traditional South Indian family, full time helps are like, a taboo. It's like, what? You want someone living with us? I'm like, yeah, I want someone living with us. Why? Because she will replicate me. I'm like, replicate you, and what are you going to do? I want to go out and I want to, do what I want to do. It's not that I'm not going to be there. It took a lot of time convincing family to make them understand the concept that in order for me to go and do something, I need support system, right? At home, I need to ensure the house is in order. I need to ensure food is on the table. I need to ensure my kids are never hungry. They're attended to when they need someone around. Now, should it always be a mother? Not at all. But should a mother definitely be there? Yes, of course she should be there. So there's a clear priority between these two, right? So I think that understanding for me started coming in at that point of time. Initially, I hired a help, and the first thing I told her was, "You need to learn sign language in order to ensure that my son with a special need, probably could converse with you." And I did go through that really difficult journey of stepping out of my house and somebody calling me and telling, Harini, Bhargav is in the balcony. Are you okay with it? I would literally rush back home and check, oh my God, is everything okay? And then I'd go back, with a big sigh of relief saying that, okay, fine, it's fine. But those kind of guilt feeling that, I've left my kids home, they're alone. And at a point of time doing this for a couple of months, I realized that actually I was giving my children more quality time than quantity time. So, which means while I was working inside this house in this tiny little bedroom that I was talking about, I used to spend almost 12 to 13 hours inside that room, and with this mental feeling that my kids are right in the next room, my kids are right in the next room. Whereas I was stepping out of the house for 7, 8 hours peacefully and coming back home and not doing anything other than just being around kids. I think This is very important of drawing that line. And what's the point in being physically right next to them and you're not able to actually give your time at all, rather than actually stepping out and coming back fully recharged and refreshed and being with them and doing something which they want to do along with you, right? So that realization, and that comes when your house is in order. That's the first number thing that you need to ensure when you want to step out of the house. And when this started, I think I set up the tiny little venture, and made my dad and me started going out, and the company started scaling at a point. I'd like to say one interesting story about how we actually went about hiring people, right? When I had this homegrown venture, like when we were inside the house, I still remember my dad told me that, Harini, you can't be doing everything in the company, right? You can't be the dishwasher, the packer, the delivery boy. You can't be everything. Come on, you need one help. So I was like, and at that time, Shivi, we were still inside the house, right? And you know very well that if you want to find a resource who wants to work for you, you can't call them to your house saying, "Chalo, ghar aa jao, this is your workplace." That doesn't happen, right? So I didn't know how to find a resource, but I really needed an educated resource who can actually read and write. And then I went to the security guard in my condo, and I told him, "भैया मुझे एक लड़की चाहिए काम के लिए." And he was like, "दीदी क्या काम है?" ऐसे ही झाड़ू पोछा बर्तन. I said, "आप भेज दो, मैं देख लेता हूँ." So the next day morning, outside my door, there were like a line of girls. Like everybody, whenever I opened the door, they were like, "दीदी क्या काम है आपके घर में? झाड़ू पोछा बर्तन." I kept on rejecting one after the other, and suddenly I spotted one girl. She was about 21, 22 years old, very young girl, wearing a sari, covering her head, like, literally traditional girl. She spoke very broken Hindi, and she was like, I asked her, "Where are you from?" She said, "I'm from Sundarbans." I'm like, I asked her, "Are you educated?" She said, "Graduate too, Didi." I was shocked. I'm like, "Graduate? And why are you looking for Jadu Pocha Bartan?" She said, "English nahi aati, Didi, mujhe." Um, then I asked her, "Can you read and write English?" She said, "हाँ, पढ़ सकता हूँ, लिख सकता हूँ, पर बोल पाता नहीं." I said, "Okay, you're selected." And then the next day morning, she came to my house. I gave her a bunch of invoices, and I told her that I'll give you 1 hour time. And her name was Momita. So I told her that I'll give you 1 hour's time. I'll come back and I'll ask you. Just tell me what you understood. So after an hour, she told me, "दीदी ये कोई बिल लग रहा है, कोई किसी ने साबुन ऑर्डर किया है, किसी ने लिप बाम ऑर्डर किया है." I'm like, "Good, you're double selected. You understand what I do." So, for a salary of 5,000 rupees, I hired Momita, who was literally a raw girl from a tiny little village called Sundarbans. With 2 months of training, she was able to tell me and my dad, "अंकल हम मंडे टू थर्सडे प्रीपेड ऑर्डर करेंगे, सिर्फ फ्राइडे हम सीओडी ऑर्डर करेंगे, एक प्रोसेस चाहिए हमारे कंपनी में, ये है." The kind of growth, or the kind of evolution that I saw in Momita's journey was completely rewarding. And I was like, if I can do this with Momita, come on, I don't need anybody else at all. So with that thought process, and when I moved, by the time I was moving into the this tiny little office space that I'd taken outside, you won't believe I had like 3 or 4 girls working in my house, for this tiny little venture called Soapworks. And literally my guards, in the security guards in the condo, used to wonder, what are four girls doing in Harini's house? Like it's so fishy. Like, 4 girls, what are they doing inside the house? So at that point, when I moved out, literally every single worker that I picked up was from my condo where I lived in, trying to figure out which girl is educated. Can I pick her? Can I train her? And literally today, Momita, if I have to tell you, from getting a 5,000 rupees salary, today she earns 10x. Still, she's with Earth Rhythm. She earns 10x of 5,000, and she leads a team of 15 girls on the production floor. She leads the entire production. I think that journey of starting at a very humble level, you don't really need always to have the fancy, the jargons or the gadgets or the people. So there are one thing I've realized in this journey, Shivi, there are two types of organization. One is top to bottom, and the other one is bottom to up, right? Top to bottom are those the ones that you train, like the IIMs, IITs, getting into, and literally the plan, the business plan, and then you hire, you set teams, groups, and then build a company in a set manner. Now mine is a bottom up company. Bottom up company, I had no plan in my hand, literally one person, and then I added two more, and with the little that I had, then we became four, and then we became eight, and then we became, so it's a literally a bottoms up company that we grew. And I think it was a, to be very honest with you, like I told you, it's an accidental journey, right? We made a lot of mistakes along the journey, but I think what consistently was working was the passion, and wanting to have the right kind of people around me, like the support system, right? Whether it was the full-time help in my house, or whether it was my dad who came in at the right time and who told me. I still remember one conversation with my dad, who initially when we started the company, he was like, he asked me, Harini, where are you actually taking all this money that the customers are giving you? I said, savings bank account. He's like, what? I'm like, how are you buying the raw materials? I said, savings bank account. He was like, oh my God, Harini, do you even know that that's not the right way to do a business? He then, he literally set up the sole proprietor company. He ensured that I understood the concept of current account, that money, whatever the purchases made, the raw materials purchased, and all the revenues that come in has to come into the same account, go out from the same account, and all of these tiny little things. Being a homemaker, I had no clue, right? And I think that journey, was possible because of all these, tiny little support system that I had around me, and using the best utilization of the resources, right? You don't always require very expensive resource. You always don't require, at that level, what I needed, it was more than sufficient to run the journey. Will that be sufficient today at a larger scale? Not really. So I think that journey of, identifying the right resource at the right time, I think that's what really helped in this entire, the growth trajectory.
And you bring in so many interesting points, Harini, right? Throughout your journey. The number one thing, and I also think about this a lot, right? If I'm doing something out of love as a passion project on the side, and the day I stop loving it, if it is not making me any other benefit, for example, a monetary benefit associated with it, I would rather just go and watch Netflix, right? Like that's a better use of my time. I would just go and sleep. I would just cook something interesting. So that's a very balanced way of looking at things. And passion can drive us for a few months, even years, for example, in your case, but it is not enough or adequate to continue to drive us through that journey. And from where you started and where you are now after 10 years, it has been a very, very interesting journey. And the other thing is also that our parents are, we can think that they have a difference of opinion, but they also want the best for us. So in that sense, they are also looking out for us and making trying to make our journey a little bit easier. And you can go to all these big colleges and get these degrees, but if you're not on the ground, you will not know the basics. And if you do not know the basics, then you can't do a business, right? And for me, business is not valuation. Business is selling a product and making a margin. That's business, right? And from day one you should be making a margin. That's how you know that you are in a profitable business, rather than really thinking that let me just invest some money now, let's see 5 years 10 years down the line what happens. So many interesting points that you bring, Harini. Very, very interesting. And now, talking about this business that you started as Soapworks back in 2019, and now it has grown to a what, a 100 crore plus revenue company in 2023, right? So that's a very large company. And then you have backing of Nika for Earth Rhythm, right? So Nika is your one of the investors. So walk us through a little bit of that journey as well, because you started and you are a female founder, a woman, working woman. So did you see anywhere where you were sort of downplayed because of your gender, or anything where you thought you were not paid the right amount just because of your gender? So talk us through a little bit about that, because I know that happens so much in the corporate, and we're still trying to, and the pay gap is real, right? For the same level, a woman would be paid, I think, 86 cents on a dollar. So that's where it comes down to. So just walk us through your journey and when you started to raise money for your venture. How did you go about it, and what were some challenges that you faced?
Okay, this will make me a little emotional because this is very, very close to my heart, especially this fundraising, initial days of fundraising, right? Before I start into that, Shivi, I'd like to say that businesses are profitable. So I honestly believe that till the business is profitable only till the time an investor is not in the business, right? The minute an investor comes in, there is a rocket growth in the company. And that always comes with a huge burn, right? A big cash burn that comes in because all the money that the investor brings in goes into the marketing budget. And marketing is all below the CM1 and CM2 ke baad, everything comes after that, which means that you really burn that money to actually get that revenue growth. So I don't today, if you ask me, that, Harini, will you, if you start a new company, will you get an investor on board? I'd say I'd like to survive as much as possible without an investor. And if I have no way out, then only I'll go to an investor, right? So that's the short answer as to, how, you would probably want a company to grow organically, right? So coming to that note, Shivi, when we started, right, we had a 5x growth every year from 2019 onwards. So 2019, we started Soapworks. 2020, we again had a 5x growth. 2021, we did a 5x growth. We grew 5x year on year. And right from 2020 pandemic time onwards, I started getting a lot of inquiries on LinkedIn and, on everywhere, on emails, everything, saying that, investors coming and asking me, hey, I'm from this, investing company. Would you like to, probably have a chat with us? Honestly, I ignored a lot of those requests in the initial days of 2020, right? And I'd go to my dad and I'd ask him that, Daddy, why are people wanting to invest money in my company? I mean, what do they get out of it? My dad was like, they get equity out of it. I'm like, what's equity? Like, they take a share in your company. I'm like, literally, Shivi, I was that naive and I didn't even know what investment was when I started. Like, a typical problem of a housewife becoming a businesswoman. Like, you don't know. And, and I was very humble and I asked my dad, tell me what it is. I mean, why are they wanting to put money in my company? So then he told me that probably you'll have to give them stake in the company. They'll have a say in what you will do. So my dad being that traditional banker, my dad was, 40, he had a 40-year experience in a banking domain, and he's very traditional banker, and he's like, we are not taking any external money. You want money? I'll raise a loan. You're not taking investors' money. So, and for a very long time, this was the kind of conversation, and I used to just go by my dad's words, and if he says no, and I will be like, no, I'm not interested. But then in later part of 2020, I had one of the biggest VC firms approaching Earth Rhythm and wanting to invest. And to be honest, Shivi, at that point of time, I'd call it one of the brightest time of Earth Rhythm. I was sitting on 10 term sheets, and I was doing inky pinky ponky to figure out which VC company to go with, and they were fighting with each other for valuations and everything, simply because the company was 100% profitable. It was a bootstrap company. It was a clean balance sheet. There was nothing in, there was no any liabilities involved. So everybody was fighting to invest in Earth Rhythm. And out of all those, I chose the number one, which everybody, I don't want to name the VC firm, but they were the number one. Even today, they're the number one in the market, and one of the largest VC firms. And I chose them thinking that I will have the biggest kind of growth because they will help me in building this company forward. And I signed the term sheet, and before I get into that, I'll tell you the kind of conversations that I had with before getting the term sheet. They generally ask you things like, what are your gross margins, what is your CM1, CM2. After every conversation, I'd be so embarrassed, and I would go running to my dad and ask, Daddy, what's CM1, what is contribution margin, what is net profit, and these kind of basic things when they ask you for numbers. And that's when I realized running a business is not always about just making a product and selling it. You should really know, where are you spending, where are you earning, what are you making at the end of the day after all the expenses, right? When you, for example, when I was first time sitting with my dad and making cogs, cost of goods, for each product, my dad would say, even when I was manufacturing inside the house, I'm telling you, Shivi, my dad would say, you need to add electricity, you need to add. I'd be like, electricity, I'm manufacturing in my own house, why do I need electricity? Obviously you need to add electricity. You make the product, so labor cost is involved in it. So tiny little things like these, which a housewife would probably not really know, was very critical at that point of time to figure out what is the ideal cost of goods sold for each and every product that I was making, and all of that. So that those conversation in the initial days, a lot of investors were hesitant after the first conversation, or had the trust that, come on, this girl doesn't even know how much she's making in the company. Probably it's probably just a fact that she's started something and she's not able to do anything. And that's the kind of thought process. But despite all of that, because we grew 5x, I managed to get a couple of term sheets. And when I freezed on this one particular number one VC firm that I wanted to go with, I'm talking about 2021, Shivi, when the company was still very, very small. We were hardly 8-10 of us in the company. And typically, because I told you the kind of employees I had hired, right, like from my condo, the girls whom I had hired, they were not very computer proficient, right? So all of the every single accounts was maintained on ledger books, not on computers or Excel sheets. It was all ledger books. And that VC firm, since they were like the global VC firm, they had appointed PwC to do due diligence on Earth Rhythm. Right now, for a tiny little company, At that level, appointing PwC to do diligence was one of the biggest nightmare ever, right? The diligence went on for almost 6 months for the size of Earth Rhythm, for 6 months, right? And they were like sleepless nights. Like, the first thing when they came on board, when PwC came on board, they were like, Harini, where are your bombs? I'm like, bombs? What are bombs? Bill of material. I'm like, what is bill of material? They were like, don't you have any kind of a record as to, how what you manufacture, how much you manufacture, and what is there at the end of the day? Like, of course we do. Like, where are they? I'm like, I gave them big book of ledgers. I'm like, we have all the records here. And they were shell shocked. And they were like, you know what? You have everything in ledgers? You don't use Excel sheets also? I'm like, come on, the kind of resources that I hired at that point of time cannot use Excel sheets. And obviously, they don't know Excel formulas or anything. So we use traditional manual method, and that's how the business survives. So because of all these kind of issues that I had at that point of time, the diligence literally took 6 months. And for everybody, today when I talk about this outside, everyone like, come on, at that size you had PwC doing diligence on you. I'm like, of course. Well, I mean, that's what they wanted. And um, I still remember one night after 6 months of fighting with with PwC in terms of justifying all the kind of accounts and everything. It was a finance due diligence. And one night the time was around 2 a.m. in the night, and the call was between PwC and me. And my dad was just behind me, just lying down on the bed. And I just shut the laptop and I just fell on the laptop and I was like, I'm done for today. And my dad just asked me one question at that point of time, and he said, Harini, you are 100% profitable company today, right? And these investors have not even come on board, and you have already lost your sleep. Time is 2 a.m., and last 6 months you've been just running pillar to post, and this is going to be the fate. And are you ready for this, right? That night, Shivi, it was a very tough night for me, and I went with a very heavy heart to bed, and I was mentally prepared to lose the battle because I was not able to convince PwC at any point of time in terms of anything. And I went to bed. Morning, I woke up, and I had mentally decided that I'm going to go on the call and tell them that I thought I scheduled a call with the VC, and I said I thought I'll put my hands up and say, hey, come on, this is not working anymore. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And when I went on that call, before even I could open my mouth, the other side, the guy on the other side said, Harini, you know what? I wanted to have this conversation with you. I think you're not quite ready, to be funded completely. We see a lot of gaps in the entire, business, and I think you need to work on those gaps before we could probably come back and reevaluate to invest in Earth Rhythm. And that's it. The conversation ended. And I just shut the laptop and I cried 2 hours straight. I was weeping because that was my first sense of rejection in life, in terms of somebody rejecting me after doing so well, after having a successful company, after having 10 term sheets, after having a line of investors wanting to invest in Earth Rhythm. The first one actually rejected me, saying that there are flaws in your business. I couldn't take it. It took me a month to get out of that. And, I was feeling so demotivated, dejected. And they also lost that trust because they somewhere felt that Harini, being a housewife, probably will not be able to drive this business to 100 crore or a 500 crore, or probably take it to the IPO, because the conviction was that she was not able to actually probably convince the numbers or probably put them into Excel sheets. And how is she going to build a large organization? So that's the kind of doubt usually investors have, right? For them, they need to see scalability, the growth of the business clearly visible in front of them. And after 1 month of sitting at home and literally crying over this, my dad told me that, Har, coming. I don't know why you're sitting and crying, Harini. You've not lost anything. The company is still with you. It's okay if they don't want to invest you. At least you were doing what you were liking, right? Come on, get up and let's go. After a month of, getting over this shock, I started going back and started working and all of that. And after that, in that particular round, along with this VC, there was another VC firm that was co-investing. So that guy came on board and he called me and he said, Harini, you know what, we believe in your business and I want to invest in Earth Rhythm. I literally put my hands and I said, thank you so much. I had a fun with investors and I don't want anybody investing in Earth Rhythm. I'm happy, being a bootstrap company. And then he said, Harini, you know what? I had access to your PwC report, and it's actually not as bad as you actually imagine it to be. There are one or two missing points which I can help you fulfill. If you are okay to take help, I'm okay to help. And I don't know what struck my mind, Shivi. I said, come on, I'll take your help. Tell me, what are the missing points? And the first thing that he told me was, Harini, you need to build an ERP. You need to have ERP in place. Even if it's a small company, you're a manufacturing company, you need to know how your raw materials are traveling in the company and how does it convert into a finished goods. You need to have that visibility in terms of at what level, what cost is getting added, so that you need to justify this at every point. And he helped me, that investor was very, very, friendly. He helped me actually build ERP in the company, several other process, digitalized a lot of things in the company, and ensured that, we were not actually struggling with, reporting. It's not enough. So there's a proverb that says that it's not enough if you're doing justice. You should be appearing to be doing justice, right? So it's not enough if you actually do numbers. You should be able to justify and validate those numbers, and that's very, very important. So, and hence, from single entry, we were maintaining all accounts in single entry bookkeeping. We changed it to double entry bookkeeping, and a lot of other changes that we did internally in terms of, to become more investor friendly. And after 6 months of doing it, the same investor came back and said, "Can we invest in Earth Rhythm?" I said, "Fine, we're ready now." And that's how the journey started. We raised 1.2 million USD in the first round in 2021, and Aniket Angel Fund came and they invested about 1.2 million, and we started from there, right? And I think the next subsequent year, uh, the following year when we were raising Series A, I think by now I could probably call myself that I had gotten really ready as to handling investors and understanding the jargons, the kind of expectation that investors have out of you and all of that. It was pretty easy the second time. But it was a little different this time because the expectation from a slightly a growth stage brand would be very different from a seed stage brand, right? You need to show the fact that you will be able to probably scale it to a 500 crore in 3 years down the line. And that journey was slightly different. So generally they say when you're running a business, 0 to 1 is very easy. 1 to 10 is you get there. That 10 to 100 is the toughest, right? It's a lonely journey, and getting to that 10 to 100 takes a lot of time, effort, and so much of money is required. So I think I would probably say that today we are at that 1 to 10 journey still. That 10 to 100 is still left out for us. But I think the entire journey, so in terms of your question as to did I feel sense of anybody rejecting just because I was a lady, at various points, Shivi. I would walk into board meetings and people would say that who's taking care of the kids? Today is Sunday. You're here. I mean, I don't think anybody would say that to a man, right? Who's walking into a board meeting. Who's taking care of the kids? Come on, my husband could be taking care of the kid. My help could be taking care of the kid. Anybody could be taking care of my kid. But that's these are signs that I used to always wonder why these questions always come only to women. Why is it that just assumed that if I am here, then who's looking after them? And today I would probably I'd confidently say from the time I was sitting at home as a homemaker to time that I'm actually being a full-time entrepreneur today, my son's my older son I'm talking about, it's the child with Down syndrome, his ability in terms of being independent has become much, much, much larger and wider when I've started stepping out of the house. Why? Because he had to come out of his comfort zone. He knew his mom was not around. He knew nobody's going to give him food at the strike of 12 o'clock, right? So he had to communicate. Even if he could not talk, he had to do sign language. He had to tell somebody that I had to eat. I want to drink water. So I think that pushed him out of the comfort zone. And why? Because I wasn't around there. And I think at various levels these kind of challenges keep coming, but then you keep winning small battles to move forward. And even investors, right, in the initial days, I think today things have changed, to be very honest. Once you've proved yourself to a certain extent, Shivi, people start believing in you. But in the initial stages, right, it's very difficult to convince an investor that being a woman, you will be because they always have this feeling that priorities change for women. This is one common thing I always hear, that women's priority always change. It changes like the season. It doesn't. It's just that we have a lot of things to balance. You just need to see whether the balancing act is fine. But it's not that our priorities change. My priority is still the exact same thing. It's just that sometimes this could be higher, this could be lower, at times this could be higher, this could be lower, but at the end of the day my priorities are same. That convincing part actually did take a lot of time, and I think that will not change also for a couple of more years is what I think. But today if you see, I think you have a lot more women entrepreneurs out there, right, from Vinita of Sugar Cosmetics to Ghazal from Mama Earth. There are many women out there who have actually proved themselves, and it is changing. And the second thing is hiring. very important aspect of being a woman CEO and hiring, right? Especially when you're building a company. I saw recently, I think Ghazal saying in one of the reels in her Instagram that there was an employee who refused to actually report into her because she was a woman. I have gone through the same thing. I still remember, I hired a very senior resource at a VP level, and didn't want to report into me because I was a woman. I mean, come on. These kind of challenges do come at times. People really differentiate you, thinking that, oh, she's a woman, I can't report into her. I have 15 years of experience. She does not have that much amount of experience for her to lead me. So these kind of things do keep coming. And I think that's why they still say, when you run a business, you don't invest in anything other than good people around you, because your people are your assets, right? Investing in the right resource, the right people who are around you, is extremely critical. And if you start doing that from a very early stage, they become the pillars of your organization. I think that's the secret about how you actually navigate through this.
Being a woman founder, being a homemaker prior to that, and it was multifold, right? That's what my understanding is from our conversation. That sure, there is a bias in the market about the capabilities of a woman, and if she is really able to do that, and the priority is changing. But at the same time, the onus is also on us to continue to upskill and continue to prove ourselves. And it's just when we have done that enough, when we have built that trust over a long period of time, then things start to become a little bit easier, if not a cakewalk. So definitely so many interesting nuggets where we cannot just put the entire onus on the outside or external, but it also, the responsibility also lies with us in terms of how do we develop ourselves. So just taking a break and moving to a very interesting rapid fire question round with you, Harini, because I know we have been talking about very heavy topics. So, just to bring in a little bit of fun, and what I want you to do is just give me the answer, the first thing that comes to your mind. That's all, right? And these are going to be fun questions, and let's go. Coffee or tea?
Coffee, always.
Fame or money?
Fame.
The most important thing in your life?
um, I think being with my son and traveling countries. I think this is at the moment, this is what I'm enjoying the most, traveling countries and being with my kids.
The most important person in your life?
My dad.
Mountains or beaches?
Mountains.
Name your favorite movie.
It's very difficult, Shivi. There's so many, but I like Shawshank Redemption the most.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
What's your regular Starbucks order?
Matcha latte.
What's your favorite book?
I don't read books at all. Absolutely not. Not even magazines.
Okay, favorite TV series?
I like Big Bang Theory.
That's a good one. Okay, so you have to put in order of importance, just like the fastest finger first. Success, money, career, health, family.
Health, career, success, family, money. I think I said family the last.
And who do you text the most? If you open your cell phone right now, who are you texting the most?
My close friend Drishti.
It's interesting. Drishti is also my younger daughter's name. So,
Wow.
uh, and just to complete this, what is your favorite quote or motto in life?
I think live and let live is something that I really believe in a lot. And there's a reason to it, right? I think throughout my entire journey, Shivi, I've had a lot of, people pulling me down. When I say pulling me down, not necessarily in the wrong sense of jealousy or anything like that. People even looking out for you sometimes can be pulling you down, right? For example, like we discussed about parents, their protective nature of wanting to look out for their kids, for their grandchildren, could actually make you feel that they're pulling you down, right? So that's not in a bad sense, but you're constantly fighting all odds to reach where you want to. And I always used to tell all the people that, come on, do what you want to do, live and let live. That's it. That's the mantra of life.
That's very interesting, Harini. Thank you for sharing. Now let's get into after the business, right? Now we talked through your journey of the 10 years, how you set up, how you started, and so on and so forth. What are some lifestyle changes that you have seen now that you're a successful start a founder, and Earth Rhythm has started to gain more and more traction?
I think the changes, lifestyle changes that I did was it was some of them were from good to bad and some were from bad to good. Uh, good to bad was before Earth Rhythm took off. I was a very passionate cyclist. I was very serious about cycling, and I did Manali to Leh. I did Kashmir to Kanyakumari. I did Gateway of India to India Gate. All this on cycle, non-stop cycling, right? Literally long distance cycling. I was very passionate. I wanted to do triathlon. I wanted to do Ironman series, and that was all. These are all my dreams. But from being that fit, I went completely being unfit when Earth Rhythm took off, and the pressure kept building. Like I told you last time, right? When investors come in, the pressure keeps on building, right? So there's more expectation, and you start compromising on things that you actually have other things to do in your life. You keep compromising on them, and one such thing is fitness, and I think that's from good to bad. I think I would call it fitness that went down. But other lifestyle changes was, I think, I became more systematic and more, how to tell you, putting things in order, right? For example, I plan my days really well these days, very well. Like I have a very planned schedule. Till today, I don't believe that I need an executive assistant or anything to manage my calendar, because I believe that if I have my calendar, like even for any tiny little meeting, I tell them, please, can you put it on my Google Calendar? And that's because it helps me understand my day clearly well, even if it's a doctor appointment for my son, or whether it is simply having a chat with a friend. I prefer to put it on a calendar because you clearly know that this is my free time, and after this I'm off, I'm not doing anything, right? And I think that is something that I, got into a habit once I started, getting into business. The third thing, as a, probably lifestyle changes, would be my dressing sense, right? From being a homemaker, probably being in a night dress all through the house, I really enjoyed the fact that, you could actually every day flaunt and wear good clothes, put on makeup, and, especially, I'm not a very makeup heavy person, but, being, running a skincare brand and having a lot of cosmetics on the portfolio, people always ask me that, what is your favorite product? And I'd find it so embarrassing to tell them, what I hate, even washing my face, I hate it. And but then I'm honest, and I tell them that I'm the laziest person when it comes to skincare. I don't think I've actually diligently applied vitamin C or hyaluronic acid or anything on my face till today. It's just a fad, right? If we're trying a new product in the company, I'd like to use it for a week, and then I'm out of it. I just don't like to keep continuing it, and it's just me. And I think those kind of things, lifestyle changes happens. But other than that, I think the biggest thing is, I've learned to appreciate and value other people's time as much as my own time. And the last one is traveling. Wow, how did I even forget that? If you're actually following me on Instagram, you'll see that I'm every other 2 months I'm traveling somewhere, and I think that's become my most enjoyable activity. Sometimes, these days I have prioritized it in such a way that once or twice in a year I go with my kids, and maybe twice or thrice a year I go alone, because when I do solo trips, I find a lot more joy in terms of how I'm able to connect with world, understand the lifestyle outside, the food, the culture, and all that. I think these are things that I have really enjoyed as part of my lifestyle changes once after being an entrepreneur.
That's so interesting, Harini. Thank you so much for sharing. What was the last trip that you took? Where did you go? Anywhere interesting?
Russia, December, I went
Wow.
to Russia.
It must have been so cold in Russia at that point.
Yeah, it was super cold, super cold. On that note, I'd like to also say that I went there because Earthdom is present across 200 outlets in Russia, through a store called Rivgosh. It was one of the proudest moment for me to actually go to Russia and go to every single Rivgosh store and see Earthdom in the entire rack over there, right? And hence, these are opportunities for me to actually travel to go and see where Earthdom is placed on the shelf.
Okay, so moving on to next question, and now we talked about your journey and how your life has completely transformed from say a 10-year ago, Harini, and to now. So what are some challenges that you see Indian working women especially face in India? And do you have any advice as to how can they overcome those challenges?
One common thing that I have seen, I'm going to talk from my perspective on this question alone, Shivi, because I have a very different perspective, and mine is a very not a usual frequent one. Because I have a child with disability, I've come across many women who've reached out to me and who tell me that, Harini, um, can you give me some tips as to how you started working? Because seeing your story, I feel so energized, and I really want to get out, and I also want to do something of my own. It's not that they are not prioritizing their children, because everybody deserves to actually have their own time at some point, right? I think that's one of the biggest one advice that I'd give is, I see two different set of people out there. One is, in today's generation, people like to delay having kids simply because they prioritize career, or there are the other set of people who've had kids very early like me, and is not able to get back to probably going back to a full-time career simply because they are not able to prioritize work anymore or more than kids. Both are wrong, I'd say. Building a balance and doing it at the right timing is all that matters. I appreciated you as well, right? The way you timed your pregnancy and stuff. I think that's very important, which women need to understand. Timing your life is very important. It might look silly in the initial days, but when you get married, you should know when exactly you want to pause, when you want to take a break, when you want to restart your career. Of course, I was thankful that in my career till 32, I did nothing and I was a housewife. And then suddenly my company took off, and I had a good journey. But not everybody will have such a, it was a fluke, I would say, in my case. But you can't rely on luck and fluke in your life. But if you really plan it well, I think that is the key to probably having a very balanced life. I know some women whom I've met. I've been very, very, proud of them, or probably amazed seeing how they actually planned. Getting they were very clear in terms of getting married at 28. I'll not have a child till 32, and then I'll have my first child at 32. It works. It does work because you've actually created a plan for yourself, and you know that until this time I'm going to dedicate time to work. I need to take a break for 2 years after that, and then I'm going to recharge and come back to work again. In this journey, I think what is even more important is support system. I think we spoke about this a lot before. Having, it can be anyone. It need not be your family also. It can simply be a house, a help that you are getting, a helper that you are getting into your house. But a support system is mandatory for you to probably feel relieved and get out of the house with that comfort in your mind.
Definitely. So many interesting perspectives here, Harini, and I absolutely agree that planning a little bit of your life is also important. And the other thing that I also want to just stress on is that somehow what happened during my generation or our generations, right, is that we started to give undue importance to career and building careers and waiting too long to start a family, right? And but a family, if you want to build one, gives you a different kind of fulfillment. It's a very different part of your life that we should also prioritize at the right time in our life, right? We cannot just delay this for when we are 35, when we are 40, right? Life does not work like that. So that's also very important to understand that finding a right partner who can trust, who you can build with, that's key to even building your career, even building a family, even traveling outside, right? So that's something very interesting and very important that you bring in for our audience today. So Harini, I'll ask you this last question, right? You're 36 years old now. And if you could go back to the 21-year-old Harini, right? What is one key piece of advice that you would give her?
Don't get married. I'm sorry, but that's the piece of advice I'd give. That's also because, again, personal journey, Shivi, to be very honest. I got married very early, right? And I got stuck with, a lot of things at that age, like what you mentioned. Doing right thing at the right time is very important, and choosing the right partner is critical, at most critical, right? Since I got married at a very early age, I think I didn't really pay so much importance, or rather, I would even call it that it was my ignorance at that point of time. I didn't even know what marriage was, having a child was, and I had no idea as to what starting a family even meant. And I went ahead and mine was an unplanned pregnancy. I had a child even before my first wedding anniversary on my lap, and I had no clue, what to do with a child with Down syndrome. So I think these kind of surprises, probably if I had planned it well, if somebody would have told me at 21 that, hey, Harini, No, don't get married so early. Get married at 28. I would have fought my battle with my dad and told him that I don't want to get married. But I didn't have that, anyone telling me at that point of time. So I think if I had to go back, I'd only say something that, probably, Harini, wait and don't get married so early.
That's such an interesting perspective, and I think it ties back exactly to how we were discussing that planning your life and having a plan is of utmost important, right? Right, and I think it's also the mindset, the social stigma in India around aging, and as soon as you're 30, you're auntie. Right, and your life is over, and now you can't do anything with your life because you're 30 now. You have to just sit and watch your kids, and that's the social image that we have built of a woman in India, and uh, that needs to be challenged. That needs to be changed.
People say that, your 20s are your career phase, your 30s are your family phase. That's how it's labeled, right? Like the minute you cross 31, 32, they say that, are you thinking about starting a family? So that's the kind of conversation people start having once you touch your 32, 33, and those 20s. And the reason why, again, I tell you that I'd probably tell myself, if I was, going back to my younger self, don't get married, is because the 20 to 30 is a very prime time of your life, because you are figuring out a lot of things about yourself as an adult, and you need to do that. You need to live. I always, one regret I have in my life is, Shivi, I've never lived alone in a hostel or anything before my marriage, and I have the biggest regret of my life, because I really think, whether it's a boy or a girl, you really need to live alone for a couple of months or years to actually understand what life is. When I say live alone, earning your own money, working somewhere, and understanding what life is before you get married, because you actually understand priorities, you understand how you manage your finances, how you actually live through the entire month earning your own money. I think these are critical things I think one needs to experience before even, thinking about starting a family.
Financial sovereignty is so important for a woman, right? And especially for a woman who has kids and is a housemaker, then she basically has no idea how the finances are working, and it's so important. Um, Definitely, Harini, it was absolutely great talking with you. It was a great conversation. I'm certain that the the young generation who's listening to you would relate, can be inspired, right, and take action in accordance with the plethora of advice that you have given us. So thank you so much for taking the time and speaking to us today. And it was lovely speaking with you.
Thank you, Shivi, thank you for having me, and I'm super glad to be sharing this journey again.